I'm glad that today we have new faces on the show, and I would like to welcome them. We have Angelo Izama. Angelo is the Uganda Investment Authority board member. We have Pollar Awich, this is the NRM, and I can see we have Albert, we have Miriam. I'm very glad to have you, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking at something very interesting today. We also have, I see we have Faith Ekudu, we have Francis Kamuhanda. You're very much welcome. Now, we have been looking at a couple of issues, especially facing the diaspora. And the last time we were here, we're looking at managing personal finances, saving for retirement for Uganda diaspora. In that regard, today we want to talk about, fine, we have saved our little money that we have hassled for in the diaspora. How do we spend this money? How do we invest this money? So today we're looking at diaspora community investment in Uganda, opportunities and challenges, of course, that we encounter. I want to begin with Angelo. Let's just dive into it. Angelo, you are a board member of the Uganda Investment Authority, and I'm sure you have info on a lot of things. I'm going to ask you to, in a way, introduce to us, as the Uganda diaspora, is there anything particular that you're doing that is targeting the Uganda diaspora? Are there policies in place, incentives in place for diaspora? And how do you go about it? What are we missing? What don't we know, for example?
Thank you, Lynn. It's good to see you again. Look, if you hear a child in the background, this is just the vagaries of working at home on the weekend. I am babysitting. So
well done.
Yeah, to your question, there is actually quite a lot happening in the interaction between the Uganda Investment Authority, which I have now been with since June last year, and the Ugandan diaspora. I have attended a number of events, first here in the United Arab Emirates, which, as you know, is now home to the largest Ugandan diaspora in the world. There's upwards of nearly 100, I would say by my estimation, about 120,000 Ugandans in this part of the world. And the way these interactions have often happened is that over the last 5 years, as I understand it, the diaspora, which tends to be, as in the UAE, a self-organizing group of people, indicates through petitions and through direct contacts what their interests are. The first level of that has been, documentation, that allows them to operate freely, travel freely, take care of their family members, especially where they are dual citizens or residents, etc. That is fairly advanced. I think that the debate now on dual citizenship is settled. There is a process now that you can follow, and there's an office, I understand, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Others will know better about how this works. That is dedicated to diaspora affairs. On the investment side, that's a whole different ecosystem that we are trying to understand. And at the authority, we have begun by consulting widely, diaspora from different parts of of the world, from Europe and the United States, here in the UAE, about how they ordinarily would bring in, what we call remittances, which is not quite investment yet. We can get to that. How they transfer money, which they have saved or which they have invested elsewhere to Uganda. My understanding is that the money caters to mostly take care of people at home, but there's a number of as a habit, as you know, as Ugandan social goal, I think I would put it like this: diaspora Ugandans immediately move into certain areas, where they can guarantee the long-term provenance of their money, and it's around land purchases, purchases of building equipment, construction. A lot of the times the money goes into the hands of relatives to manage for them, and 6 other opportunities, majority of which are done informally and through the agents. So because there is a specific goal actually within the investment authority strategy, to turn diaspora savings by a certain date into investments as a net percentage of GDP. There's actually a requirement on the authority to think objectively and strategically about how to engage with diaspora bodies, but also how to think about that money as investment. Where we have started now, from what I've been informed, is that the current management of the authority is currently, as we speak now, is in conversation with the central bank, that's the Bank of Uganda as a regulator, other commercial banks, fintechs, money exchange services and the like, to basically understand, how you can identify money that sits in an account as investment. Now, this is really critical, and the way to work, I think, is that the central bank and the commercial banks will eventually work out a strategy where, if you're a diaspora person sending money home, Ugandan sending money home, you can send it into a designated account. Let's call that account, say, a diaspora account. And once you operate such an account, what it will do for you is that the banking institutions, the more formal opportunities for investment, can now sort of pitch to you because you've got a financial address in the bank. So if the bank, for example, were to say, okay, look, send you an email, say, Angelo, there's a 90-day treasury bill, there's something you're interested in purchasing, or, there's a gated community, with a potential yield that is attractive, that is opening up somewhere in Mukono. Would you be interested in putting your money in that? And so on and so forth. It will create a financial address where investment can interact. But also, it allows for formal agencies, and I'm going to round this up quickly. It allows for formal agencies that are involved in catering to diaspora interests, especially now in the financial side, to start interacting in a much more formal way. I think the management of UAE thinks that this particular system here can overcome some of the challenges we've had. With regard to people sending money home, it goes into the hands of relatives and then disappears. We've had so many cases of that. And then it also allows for certain types of social services to now, because Uganda has a much more robust ecosystem of digital payments, to interact with these diaspora accounts. I'll give you just a sort of situation by way of conclusion. If you have, for example, $5,000 in your diaspora account, but you have a medical condition for an elderly person at home, the way this diaspora account works is that you can instruct your bank to work with for example, a telemedicine provider, or even another medical provider, to basically cater to that individual, and the bank would be able to send that money directly to such a provider without having to go through the hands of a third party. That's one of the advantages. But we see a lot of products of that kind developing. And also with regard to savings, these diaspora accounts would allow for preferential rates to be applied to money that comes in, for the central bank and others, for example, to look at large pools of diaspora savings as essentially investment funds, and therefore apply all the kinds of smart, financial thinking, to that pool of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo, for that presentation. And Albert, do you have something to say to that as we wait for Lynn to come online?
Angelo, good afternoon. Let me start by contesting the numbers. I think here in North America, we're still the largest diaspora community. Yes, there's this new trend of Dubai and the Gulf states, but we still, I think, hold that. I think our numbers are estimated to be about 150,000. And need I say that I think we're still the most influential Ugandan diaspora community. So just to respond, I think your heart is in a good place, and you guys are doing a great job. I can't criticize you. You're on the ground. You're the one trying to help build our motherland. But I want to add a couple of things before we move on to the bigger things, the machinery, the vehicles, the investment vehicles that you're talking about. I want you to consider two things. Here in the diaspora, at least in the North American diaspora, we are trying to, we've actually been begging. This is maybe the 15th or 10th call that I've been on with these ladies, and we're talking about this. We're trying to see how the Ugandan government, and through you, its technocrats, how you view us. And I will use another V word. How do you value us as partners so we can have a mutually beneficial relationship? And that has not happened. We sit here, we read on the news, we hear the land is given away to this foreigner. We hear the privileged skinned people being shuffled in and out of White House. We have not seen that with our community. Okay, so what is in it for us? Yes, we voted with our feet. At some point, we left Uganda. We came to look for greener pastures, but we're still Ugandans. And we still have Uganda at heart more than these fly-in-the-night investors that you're chasing after. So the mutually beneficial relationship I'm talking about is the one where you ask us what our fears are, what our interests are. And I use those two words carefully. Fears, you talk about individualized accounts. I think a lot of our people here are still mistrustful of the government and don't even dispute the fact that some people have come here running away from the system. So I don't know how successful you'll be trying to get somebody like that to open an account. But you can have a relationship with their money. And a good way is do a bond, an open market bond. Somebody will buy it. Their money will not be tagged as an individual. So the fears they have, whether real or imagined, those fears will not affect your work in Uganda Investment Authority. You don't care about what relationship the government is having with me. You really want to have a relationship with my money. You can do that by having these, I would call, blind vehicles that are not individualized. Our government has not reached the point of individualized investment from the diaspora community. I can guarantee you that. As they say in Eastern Uganda, and I'll borrow a phrase from one of my friends, lepers do not sell meat. If people don't have trust in you, they will not part with their money to put in whatever vehicle you create. So before we even move on to the bigger things, let's start there. The mutually beneficial relationship where you ask us about our interests and our values. I think I'll stop there. I see Lynn is back.
Albert?
Thank you.
All right, Albert, thank you for that. I'm sorry, my internet, and I don't know what else keeps getting on and off, but thank you for that. Izama, please, I think you have, you want to, answer what Albert has been talking about.
Yes, actually, first of all, Albert, that phrase is an excellent phrase. I want to write it down. Lepers do not sell meat. I've taken out my notebook like a good old journalist and put it down in my things to do. Look, I'm not questioning the issue of values here because for a country like ours, with our very unique political history, it's a very contested thing. And you're right, some of the people who have left voted with their feet, as you say, have done so because they disagree with the establishment, and it's not the first. I have had the I wouldn't call it privilege, but I'm in a pretty unique position because I live part of my life in some of the time in North America, in California. About 25% of the year is spent there. Another 40 or more % is spent here in the UAE. And then the rest is spent in Uganda, where I do most of my work. So I have a 360 view and interact, of course, with diaspora, both those who have influence and those who do not. So the question of values is absolutely central to it. What I disagree with you, Albert, is your assertion that we shouldn't think big because we are not yet there yet in our relationship. I think it's actually important for countries, or certainly agencies like the authority on whose board I serve, to think in big and bold ideas. And yes, this diaspora account business, which may have challenges, as you said, with the question of anonymity and protection of the interests of those diaspora who may wish not to interact too closely with the establishment. But these are things that we can overcome. And I actually pulled up the some of my notes on what has been, what is the thinking of the current management at the authority. And yes, it's actually quite a broad. Besides engaging directly with diaspora through the embassies and through and through these associations, the ambition, is quite big. You can think about it, that first of all, the value of remittances themselves, which is a central influence of the diaspora, is pretty significant. Last year, I think it was, you have the numbers probably, but it was something like 1.3 billion. And yes, you say North American diaspora is still the most influential, but much of that money came from the UAE as it is. Secondly, the intention, is that, at least for the authority, is to take 10% of that money from diaspora remittances and turn it into investment. So the agenda is quite ambitious. On the question of blind investment vehicles, even now you can purchase into blind instruments that are listed in Uganda. The challenge with those is that they're few. Yes, we can list a bond specifically for diaspora, and the time may be coming in the next 5 years, for really lucrative instruments to be listed. But currently, as it is, these bonds are far in between, and in fact, it's not really the culture. You know that the environment in Uganda for this sort of sophisticated instruments is still growing. There are areas like I am concerned about, such as the growth of mortgage instruments in Uganda, for which, of course, the diaspora would be the most ideal. And these kinds of partnerships, that have in their goal much more transformative relationships between Ugandans living at home and living abroad, this is the area that we want to play in. Yes, so it is not a place where I would like to think small, and certainly it's not a place where I want to be risk averse. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Angelo, for that. We'll get back to you, Albert. I think Angelo has answered a couple of your questions, but let's listen from Pollar Awich, retired Major, and he's the Director of External Services. Major, what opportunities lie in Uganda for diaspora that Ugandans have no idea? And in your capacity as Director External Services, are there things you're privy to that we do not know about that you think we ought to know, especially in regards to investment? And this is for the diaspora Ugandans.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Am I heard?
Loud and clear.
Oh, okay. I've already been introduced. What I want to highlight our diaspora brothers and sisters is that I'm talking from a position of NRM because I'm a director at the party Director for External Services, which in where diaspora falls. And therefore, I would like to give from a party perspective. As you are all aware, the party is the one with the contract with the people, in that the party sells a manifesto during election and people vote on the account of that manifesto. Now, on the aspect of diaspora, which we think they are line ministries to implement, because as a party, when we sign contract with the people, when we go through election, we form a government. So the government works as an agent of the party. And that is why when a government fails, the party fails. And that is why the party wants a monitoring system for what the government does, to the extent that we have periodic review of what government does. For example, if we had promised people that in the election that if you vote, we shall build 10,000 kilometers of tarmac road, then we follow up with Ministry of Works. Are you building the roads we promised the people? So the manifesto therefore covers all dimensions, including diaspora. Now, as far as diaspora is concerned, you may wish to know that China as a government, or China as a country, has 40 million people outside China. And the Communist Party of China follows to know how safe are the 40 million. So equally, Uganda is estimated to have 2 million people abroad. It is in the interest of the party and through the government that we follow and get to know the welfare or the well-being of our people. The 2 million people provide 5% of the GDP. You can see we were talking of the value and the importance. So the data alone shows that government or the party and government by extension cannot sit and keep quiet. Now, what does the party expect government to do as overarching policy? One, are our diasporans well outside? If, for example, something happens, we expect government to offer counselor services. If a Ugandan is stuck in Boston or for some reason in California or UAE, for us as a party, we expect the functional government departments to take care of that, to follow and know what happens, of course, within the laws applicable. The other thing is that we make, of course, legislations. We expect relevant government branches to make legislations that keep the well-being of our citizens. That's what we are talking of. Investment code, we are talking of an applicable law there too. And once we see there is no such a law, the party liaises with the relevant government ministry, said, why don't you legislate this law? Or why don't you amend this one, which is unfair, depending on the status. The other aspect of the party is that we also ensure that security for our foreigners, our diasporians, when they come back home, is safe. Recently, we had a situation where somebody came, he was a Mutoro from Fort Fatal, and he wanted bodyguards. We told him, well, the law provides that if you feel any threat, the state will offer protection. But for now, I can assure you there's nothing. Please go to Fort Fatal. Here is my number. Should you feel there's an imminent threat, we shall provide you. Fortunately, he went, there was no threat, he came back safely. So, overall, therefore, the party takes great importance of our diasporians, just like the Chinese or any responsible government does. You may be aware that there's a convention, a United Nations convention called Convention on Migrant Workers. There are two countries which are very serious about this, but Uganda is a signatory and ratified, and we also do follow. That is Mexico and Philippines. Philippines has 10 million nurses abroad, and therefore they follow the implementation of this convention. Mexico has 10 million Mexicans in the United States. So this convention, developed countries seem to think that it is not good for them. Actually, they think it is idle and redundant because they said they have relevant laws in place to protect our diasporians there. But we follow also through UN because this convention gives obligation to the host countries to take care of diasporians or for migrant workers in that case. But it also gives obligations for the protection of the family. So Uganda is signatory, and we also try through this avenue by periodic reporting to Geneva, but also seeing the implementation that we even cooperate through UN agencies for the protection of our diasporians. So, as a party, one, we acknowledge the importance of our brothers and sisters abroad. The data is already clear. So we expect the relevant line ministry to handle and offer consular services abroad and everything necessary, including, for example, consular services where somebody's passport has expired. What do we do if that person needs his Ugandan passport? So there are relevant governments or branches that we expect them to be doing. Then back home to provide enabling situation, including legislation, physical security, and of course you need roads when you come back. So the party puts great attention. Finally, as a party, those who wish, and it is not compulsory, those who wish to think they associate as NRM, the constitution of the party provides that any 20 people in any country, let's say Burundi, if you're 20 Ugandans in Burundi, you wish to form yourself into an NRM branch, you can do that. And if you're in Burundi, you form a branch, then you are an equivalent of a district NRM, like a district Soroti NRM or Masaka NRM or Mbene NRM. So that is optional for diasporians who associate with the party. But as a ruling party, we provide an overarching protection for everybody, irrespective of the party. But for those who wish to associate as NRM, then there's that window. I think I beg to stop here.
Right, thank you very much for that. I think you're trying to tell us that, well, we need to focus on where our interests lie, and therefore approach the party and the line ministries to help in that regard. Albert, I'm sure you're writing down a number of questions. So is Miriam and Francis Kamuhanda on what Pollar has talked about. We are looking at investment opportunities and challenges, especially for our diaspora people, particularly actually. And already we have highlighted the challenges, some of them, but I want to ask Francis at this point, Francis Kamuhanda, are there challenges that you think Angelo and of course Pollar and the rest of us need to look at, focus on and find solutions for?
Thank you, Lynn, and other fellow panelists. I'm always excited whenever we have this show and have interesting debates and engage and then see how we move our country forward. I'm Francis Kamuhanda and the interim chairperson of Alliance for National Transformation, or ANT party. I think I will begin with what Mr. Pollar Okwi was talking about. I'm glad Mr. Pollar acknowledged that he is also shifting the blame to the line ministries, and he's aware that they have a contract with the Ugandans to deliver, but though he's not talking about how they have not delivered, he tries to sanitize how his party is doing well. And then, of course, saying that they took the manifesto to the people and the people endorsed them. I will not dwell much into how the campaigns are manned, whether it is truly selling your manifesto and ideas to people, or coercing and buying people, or voter bribery. That shall be another debate. I think, Okwi, you have another time we can come and engage at that level. Then too, I'm glad you acknowledged the contribution of the diaspora to the GDP. But it was an open lie for you to say that the government of Uganda and NRM in particular is concerned about our security abroad and our welfare. That is a blatant lie. I will give you 3 examples. 1, you still remember when Afghanistan fell into the hands of the Taliban, how countries like Kenya, our neighbors, countries like Nigeria, were sending or chartering planes to go and evacuate their people. You remember in Uganda, for it was who took them there. They should find the way how they come back. Not that. Was that caring about our people? I will give you an example of when COVID set in. The students who were stuck in China and how government was responding in a lukewarm way. The ambassador by then, who was Dr. Crispus Chiyonga, even ran away from China and went to Uganda, left the children there, or I mean the students there, or Ugandans there. So was that part of protection? Now come to the allegation that has always been on, the mistreatment of Ugandans who go to the UAE to work or who are in the Middle East. What protection have you offered? Now, let's leave alone that. Talk of the Lumbuye incident. Although there are issues that maybe Lumbuye had with the government, but look at the gesture of what you did. Does that show protection that you mind about the people in the diaspora and their well-being? I highly doubt, but I'm inviting you that shall be a debate for another day. Look at, you are saying you engage with other countries, you are giving examples of Mexico. I'll just give an example in your neighborhood. In Kenya, Mr. Okwi, do you know that if a student is coming from Kenya to come and study, maybe from the US, because government has negotiated, they give them a visa for 5 years. For Uganda, they give you 1 year. So all of these, I think, Mr. Okwi, you have to dig much deeper about how your government operates, so that next time we engage into a more informed debate. But now let me come back to the investment opportunities and for the diaspora. Now I turn to Mr. Angelo. Thank you for elaborating. I heard you sometimes statements would come out as if you are not part of the investment authority and so on. But I would like to say this, that the basic infrastructure that we need, that we can talk about, we have been losing green on and off because of internet. Let me just begin with that. Okay, if a person wants to have an investment in Uganda, where even internet is not stable, where people can easily engage with each other via social media, for example, others have used it as business, and where Uganda, because of a simple, I can't even call it a disagreement, let's say electioneering, because somebody has criticized the president, and then the whole kind of social media is shut. Those who advertise there, they lose business and so on. And yet the world is a global village. I can sit wherever I am and do business in Uganda, invest. How do you think that somebody will develop the urge or the appetite to come and invest? Having said that, I will come to corruption. What is being done to address corruption? Because people who want to invest in Uganda are taken round and round. Look at the corruption within land itself. Look at the corruption within how the industrial parks or spaces are located. The recent one being the Vinci Coffee kind of saga that has recently happened. Do you think all these, for us as Ugandans who are in the diaspora, they give us a good example? Talk of the tax holiday. If it was not because of Parliament coming in to reduce the tax holiday, to suggest anyway, the tax holiday reduction of big foreign investors from 15 years to 5 years, and then of course it is always renewable. But when a Ugandan comes to invest, you don't get a tax holiday, you don't get these, let's say, incentives. If you can get billions of money, you give them to a foreigner to come and build a hospital, then why don't you build it yourself anyways? I can also still show up and you give, can you give me that money as a Ugandan, that on behalf of government, okay, construct this project? But so if we don't treat our own, and of course in Uganda, it is already now a trend that the economy of Uganda is in the hands of foreigners. And that is a huge risk. And recent examples, even including the one that has happened, should show you that that is a big risk. If maybe foreigners withdraw from your country, economically it will collapse within a second. Or if there is a certain disagreement. And even the profits that accrue from those investments, name them, you know, those investments that are multilateral businesses, but in Uganda. If all the profits are repatriated back to their own countries, they don't remain in Uganda. So that is a huge risk. So that's why we are saying we need to understand, and then lay proper foundations, then give the people in the diaspora the opportunity. Otherwise, we do have people who are willing to come there, so that we have China developed because of technological transfer. The people who would go to other countries, they would come back, the real Chinese. Generally, I had a friend from China who told me that at first, if you would want to set up, let's say, an industry in China, they would tell you, you should have a person who is in China who owns about a certain percentage of shares within that company. Then too, there were positions that were designated for Chinese. You don't come and you make them as workers, as how you are saying. I was reading the strategic plan for 2020-2025 for Uganda Investment Authority, where you are saying we may provide such and such amount of jobs, but the jobs are the ones cleaning, feeding the machines. But in China, they could tell you the top 5 engineers, Chinese must be there to learn how these things operate. And the moment maybe this company is not doing well, then they can leverage the expertise they have got to start up other businesses. I have a friend of mine here who went and started an agro-processing. In your strategic plan 2020 to 2025, I think it is number 1, supporting agro-processing kind of investment. But this land has been frustrated, I don't know how many times, by our own people. He's a young lady who is here in food science and technology and was telling me, Francis, I think I should give up. Simple things. So if we can frustrate our own people, and then you come here, you begin singing, you begin traveling, that 360. I equally think that maybe it is the per diem enticing you to begin rotating and roaming around. But when on ground, there is nothing that you are helping us with. I do appreciate when Angelo said the investment or the diaspora account. That is a good idea for sure. It will help us, and we can use it and maximize it, but on conditions that we are involved in a healthy conversation, and we know that it is not also wooing us into a trap. Because these scenarios of the Temangalo issues and so on, they are still ringing in our heads. We know how sometimes Uganda, when it comes to even organized institutions, more or less operate like cartels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis Kamuhanda. You pardon Kamuhanda, I think his words are a bit strong because there's a Muchiga in him. But thank you very much, Francis, for that, for stressing that. Faith Ekudu, my apologies. Will you please unmute and tell us about yourself and let us get to know you first, then we can dive into our conversation. Okay. I think she's probably just listening in, but let's move forward. I want to ask you, Miriam, we have heard, first of all, from Paula Awich about the protection that the government offers our diaspora people. The question that came to my mind as he spoke about those things, is that does the security of Ugandans abroad reflect on their investment interests back home?
Thank you, Lynn. And first of all, I would like to welcome our guests today, Mr. Angelo Izama and Awich Pollar, Faith Ekudu, and the regular panelists. We are glad to have you today. And this is one of several other conversations we've been having about investments and how best we can improve relationships, economic and otherwise, between the diaspora community and the Ugandan government. First of all, before I answer your question, Lynn, I would like to also add on what Francis said. I think the idea of creating the that relationships between the banks, which they can remotely transfer the savings of the remittances to investment ventures would really be helpful. I hope it's pushed forward and it's functioning, because most of diaspora people are frustrated by the corruption and then the squandering of remittances back home. Whether you trust people, whether they are family, whether they are business people, there is no honesty in Ugandan business community. There is no honesty in doing business either with the government or with the ordinary people. So that's the biggest challenge. Like, how do we enforce a relationship, an economic relationship, in a society where trust is really very scarce? It's so thin that even your own relatives can swindle you. Or a trusted agency. Today there could be an establishment, tomorrow it's not there. And to add on to what, Angelo, you have said, how can we ensure that even commercial banks, even those ventures put up which look like strong and well backed up security-wise, how can we ensure that after 5 years we're going to find them still up and standing? We need such assurances, maybe guarantees from the government, maybe, I don't know how they can do it, but we need to be sure that after maybe I use a certain commercial bank to invest my money tomorrow, I'm gonna be sure whether they put it in a mortgage or whatever, that enterprise will still be standing 5 years from now or 10 years or later. Because in Uganda, there are a lot of inconsistencies, and so that trust is still so shaky that most people are not so sure of what to do about how to decide to invest in Uganda, whether you should trust the public sector or you should trust your private, as all of them are really very risky. I think reducing the risks as far as trust is concerned is one way we can ensure that there is most investment and a relationship going on back and forth for a long time, which can over time bring more rewards than the whatever the means people are using today, which are not sustainable. To Mr. Awich, I think you are, NRM is so good on speeches, and today you have given us a very flowery one, which is one of the so many. But if you really want to help the diaspora community, like you said, about security, about trust, about protecting them and their interests, why don't you start with staffing the embassies? Put resources and well-qualified people in embassies. About the same in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the diaspora sector is the less equipped. And then there are these funny desks in President's office, Parliament, which really don't mean anything, and you can never go to talk to anybody there. Start by building those structures, start by equipping them, start by enforcing or following up on what they are doing, and put your resources where your mouth is. That way we can see that you are really well intended. Not to mention the incidences like the Ulumbias, which crop up here and there, and then the threats from the president. And like Mr. Bakasara said, lepers don't sell meat. If you really want to build a relationship with the diaspora community, you will start by acknowledging who they are. They are not enemies of Uganda. They are Ugandans, but just living outside the borders. To add on to that, Mr. Angelo, and I think this one goes to you and Awich as well. The biggest problem with the diaspora relations with Uganda today are the identities, the dual citizenship. Why is it so expensive? Why should it be so expensive for me as a Ugandan to register as a Ugandan? Why is there any cost at all even? the $200 that is there look like a swindling. Really, it looks like a hindrance to that instrument more than it's we need more of encouragement. Encourage people in diaspora to take up the dual citizenship so that they can participate in projects back home more than hindering them. So the dual citizenship needs to be reviewed. The cost is a big hindrance and an obstacle to so many people acquiring dual citizenship. And like we've been talking in discussions before, and even from your own experience, Angelo, you know that for Ugandans and every other person to benefit from any country they are staying in, even being able to work and live comfortably, you have to take up the citizenship in that country. And that means you are dropping your Ugandan citizenship. The dual citizenship is a vehicle of mitigating that, the best one. But then the money, the cost of achieving that is a big hindrance, which I think needs to be reviewed in order to facilitate so many people. And the NRM government can spearhead that since you have the majority parliamentarians, Mr. Awich Pollar. Let me stop here and listen to others in the meantime, Lynn.
Right, thank you very much, Miriam, for that. You still didn't answer my question about the security of Ugandans abroad. Does it reflect on the investment interests back home?
Okay, I can answer that. I thought I should. I mean, that relationship, I think Mr. Awich is really is very, very much aware that it doesn't. So I thought that was really like obvious, and I think we can do a lot more to really improve on that. And as it is one of the biggest obstacles. Mr. Awich Pollar, most people in diaspora unfortunately might relate to opposition more than NRM for a reason, and maybe you would wish to check out why. It might help you and your party as well and the government.
Right, thank you very much, Miriam, for that. I think we'll get back to Awich later on that. Faith Kudu, I don't know if you can unmute and say something. Faith Kudu. Okay. All right, no problem. Let's just move on. Albert, you unmuted before I even got to you, but interestingly, I know you have questions. I know you also have a few things to add on to that, but I wanted to ask, what kind of incentives do you think diaspora investments and remittances deserve, especially can the Uganda Investment Authority in any way make things easier and simpler for the diaspora people to identify opportunities for national development to guide diaspora investment? And if so, because they already have a strategy for that, do you think they're doing enough in that regard, or do you think there's much more that's needed to be done?
Thank you, Lynn. There's much more that needs to be done. And I sometimes feel sorry, or pity them, because these are technocrats and some of these things are not really in their control. So they're doing what they can. And I don't want, of course, people like, brilliant people like Mr. Izama. These are people who are exposed. They know what needs to be done. And I know I'm exposed to a little bit of what they are working with and the limitations that they have in their jobs and mandates. But I want to piggyback on, to answer, to clarify more on your question, I want to piggyback on what Miriam just said. There needs to be, since as Mr. Awich said, the government is in power, is the NRM government. For however they got the mandate, that is not debatable here. But the lining up of caring for the interests of the diaspora, we don't see it. What could be done more? A good example, and we've discussed this before, is Ugandans who were born in Uganda. I'm Mtoro, born in out of Foot Patrol. For the record, I'm not the one who was asking for for bodyguards. Okay, but I'm born of Toro, founding chairman of Toro American Association. I planted a flag of Toro in America and the flag of Uganda in America. You would think somebody would look at you and say, you know what, that guy. But no, you treat me as a foreigner. Because somehow I got here and I settled and I got American citizenship. You basically washed your hands off of me. Okay, so what can you do? America will never do that for you. There is no foreigner American. There's no American who was born in this land who is living in Uganda that America would ever wash their hands off of him or her. It will never happen. They could live in Uganda for 20, 30 years. The moment Uganda goes into chaos, the plane will be there at Entebbe saying, hey, American citizens, we want to evacuate you. But Uganda doesn't treat us that way. And I wanted to also mention something that Mr. Izama said of talking about the Ugandans in United Arab Emirates and how they've overtaken North America in sending remittances. Ugandans in those lands send remittances out of necessity. They go there to work. They're not putting down roots in Dubai or Qatar or anywhere that they are. They're not. Okay. How many Ugandans are working in the Dubai government? How many are they in the local officials working in there? They're not there. That's not the same. Because here we're talking about thinking long term. I'm talking about Uganda looking at us, diasporas, especially in North America, as, I don't know, a perpetual relationship. You want to have a relationship with me, but you also want to have one with my son. That's a different dynamic with the people living in Dubai and in China. I highly doubt that tomorrow a son of a Ugandan is going to be a judge in the Chinese Supreme Court. I highly doubt that. But that's possible for my son. And these things have happened. Okay, we have a Ugandan in New York, in the New York area, in the last election, lost election by a very slim margin, almost became the first Ugandan member of Congress. We have a gentleman who works here at NASA. I forget his name now. He recently led was the commander of the flight ship that went to space. I saw a young woman recently announcing the next Apple product. Those are not happening in Dubai. They're not happening in China, but they're happening in North America. So I want you to have a relationship with those people. This young woman who's the PR or putting out a marketing executive for Apple, you just don't want to look at that person. You want to look at her kids, the next generation after her. Because that's going to be another president of the US. It will be another Obama. And say, oh, the mother is Ugandan. That's where you want to look. And those are not things that are happening in Dubai and other places, because those people are not putting out roots. They're going there, they're making a dime, and they're sending almost everything that they're earning into Uganda. But looking at the relationship and somehow putting us aside, and I'm not saying that that's what Mr. Izama is saying, but somehow saying, oh, no, we're going to focus on Dubai because that's where our money is coming from. That's short-sightedness. On the relationship and what I think I'm hesitant. I want to leave that for the for Mr. Kamuhanda of the aunt and talk about the politics. But I will only add that no, in my experience, and I've lived in this community for over 25 years, in my experience, the relationship that the party known as the NRM has now with the Ugandan diaspora in North America is not one of looking out for their well-being. It's mostly that of exploitation, antagonistic relationships, and yeah, they would love to have their money, but they have not figured out to build the trust to get the money. How do you build? Again, I'm going back to what I said in the beginning. Interests and values. We've lived in this community. We live in this community. It has different values. If you don't want to align your values with those of this community, you're never going to get their trust. What has the government of Uganda and the party of the NRM done to us here? Well, it's not a secret. They've antagonized us. We had one of the best organizations here, the Uganda North American organization. And like I said in the past, if I was in State House Entebbe, I would advise the president, hey, there's a Ugandan organization in North America. I think we should keep our eyes on it. But the eye that they have kept on that organization is not the eye that I would have advised the president to keep an eye on. You gain nothing to come in the US and divide a would-be great organization that could be right now driving investments in and out of Uganda, that could be bringing exchange of expertise and the technocrats. You gain nothing by disorganizing an organization. Like, actually, you lose more. Look what happened recently when I saw ministers disowning this company that was supposedly to have been registered in Virginia. Virginia is just across the bridge. 15 minutes and I've crossed into Virginia. Imagine if there was a relationship with the diaspora community. You think somebody in any of those agencies cannot call and say, hey, community leader, or even the embassy in DC, and say, hey, can you go and find out if this company actually exists? But when do you find out it doesn't exist? After millions of Ugandan tax dollars have been swindled. After titles have exchanged hands, that's when the minister says, oh, we've tried to reach those people, but we can't. So all those, that's the synergy I'm really talking about. When I talk about the small things, Mr. Zama, I'm not really talking about, oh, let's just do small things and we cannot do big investment vehicles. Trust me, I don't measure in minors. I would like to see big things happen. But I'm saying the building blocks, the small building blocks that get us to those big things right now are lacking. And that's, I think, the answer to your question, Lynn. They can be doing more and they should be doing more. There's really no excuse. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Albert. Francis wants to leave. Francis, I'm going to give you a few minutes of your time. You say you want to leave. Finish up whatever it is you think you've left behind, and then we'll proceed and let you go.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Basically, my remarks would be that, and I would like to urge you, Mr. Angelo, that whenever we are discussing these issues and what they have on paper, and in Uganda, by the way, even when it comes to policies, we have good policies on paper, but we don't know how to put them on ground. That's what we always grapple with. And I would encourage them that they continue engaging with us. For example, I'm glad that for him, he can travel and meet people in the diaspora, like as I have always said, that there is nothing for us without us. But also it is important to listen to the advice that we are giving. Like you can't convince anybody to go and invest in a chaotic, for example, situation. And I mean here in terms of security, I mean in terms of the levels of corruption, because the people keep reading about these incidents in terms of ensuring that we are abreast and up to date with what works and what doesn't work. But also most important, it is only Uganda that does not value its citizens who are abroad. By both in terms of, if I can piggyback on what Bakasara has said, to say that how do we tap into these other generations that are coming after and we convince them. Generally, I do have my nephews whom we have been asking to take to Uganda. The first thing they pull, that you see what happened, they killed people in Uganda. They have refused. They say they can't come there. So we need to clear all these aspects. And two, there are propagandas that normally happen. I will call them propaganda because I don't have, but that's how in Uganda it begins. That if they are saying that people who don't have dual citizenship are going to lose their assets. But you find government does not come out to officially give confidence and address like the diaspora or people who are in the diaspora. And this would keep giving confidence. But otherwise, once the government keeps quiet, then once this, either if it is a propaganda or a lie, once it is told 1,000 times, then it appears that it is the truth. But also you talked about security. I would say for sure that the people who threaten sometimes the security of Ugandans who are in the diaspora sometimes is Uganda itself. Is Uganda itself that other people have reported where they get threats from even the Uganda, I would say the government agents themselves. You have criticized our country, you have done this, maybe when you step in Uganda we shall arrest you and so on. So all these have to be cleared so that we tap what is good from people who are in the diaspora than thinking that the people in the diaspora have nothing to offer, and yet we have a lot that we can add, or what we have been adding generally. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Francis. We can let you go now. Angelo, you have the floor. You've had enough from our panelists. What is your response?
Too bad Francis left. I was hoping to engage with him.
He'll pick on them. Don't worry.
Some more. But Lynn, first of all, I learned a lot from this engagement, and there are some really important points that have been made here, especially from my brother who lives outside of Washington D.C. About I now understand what he means by the kind of value-based relationship over time, because diaspora communities also tend to be not just about people living abroad, but sources of new ideas and influence. So a friend of mine who was recently one of the directors at the, he's now left, he's actually from Bugisu, a staff director in the White House dealing with gender and health. But there's so many people like that in North America and in Europe. The nature of the influence in other parts of the world is different, but we can still apply the same principle to it. The old African tradition has been that, the real value of education is in travel. Travel is education, is what we say. And that's how we've always learned to bring new ideas home and develop. So I really appreciate that point. I thought it was really important in the way he has explained how the country can look at the value-based relationship. I can't comment on some of the political points, but Francis, he made some sweeping statements. One of those I want to address really has to do with the treatment of Ugandans as investors. There is a prevailing notion, of course, that Uganda's foreign-dominated economy, mostly run by the Asians and the Chinese. But that's largely a fiction. In fact, much of the investment in Uganda is in the hands of Ugandans. There are some items, big ticket items, in industry, in financial services, that are in the hands of basically foreign capital, because Ugandans have not organized a long-term capital to control these areas or to increase ownership. But the general policy environment is actually is biased towards Ugandans, and I thought that was a fiction that one had to deal with. For example, Francis said, there is this Lubowa hospital. You look at how much has been invested in that project of taxpayers' money, and it has gone. If a Ugandan had come forward and done something similar, he wouldn't get support. But Lynn, that's a fiction. As you know, there are multiple hospitals. They may not be big. They are run by Ugandans and Ugandan families. We recently licensed a 400-bed hospital, which is basically a project put together by a guy who used to live in Pennsylvania with his partners. They are in the construction phase now. They have the same treatment, and in fact, the same sort of incentives that the Investment Authority offers is directed at them. The other day I tweeted how I thought about, or my thinking personally, about the nature of these incentives. Incentives are basically like, they constitute a pre-investment that a country makes. So we take all these things that the government might have earned money from, if you are paying taxes or if you're doing certain kind of duties, and we say we shall excuse those and vest that equity in your project because it's in pursuit of certain public goals. Now, if you look at what's going on, for example, in the oil and gas sector, there's a whole range of laws that are specifically designed to encourage Ugandan participation, Ugandan ownership, and Ugandan equity. And yes, institutions like the Investment Authority, they do recognize that, the way investment works best is if it is anchored in the citizens of that country. So there is, in fact, a market bias towards citizens, and it may not be out there, and maybe the narrative is shaped by what happens in the public sphere. But I constantly see that both the policy and some of the actions that are taken are generally in the favor of Ugandans. A lot of the people who are in our industrial parks are actually Ugandan businesses. During COVID, for instance, if you remember, one of the things that happened is that the government announced an import substitution policy, where if you can make the things in Uganda, they're made in Uganda, because we were not able to bring things from abroad. I'll give you a quick example of sanitary businesses. The businesses that dealt with hand sanitizer, masks, and protective equipment. I think I was told by the National Bureau of Standards that they went from about 4 of them to about 260 something licenses that were issued for these businesses. I think they have now dropped down to in the 60s, but there's a whole industry there now of sanitation businesses that are largely owned by Ugandans. And the public investment, which we don't really discuss as much, in creating that particular segment of industry was quite considerable. One is that the financing was largely concessionary to those companies that were setting up to do personal protective equipment. Their production lines were excused on the same grounds, of the same incentives we offer. So there's what I think in our system here, what we refer to as information asymmetry, where things happen, good or bad, but they're not shared widely, and therefore the narrative that dominates can sometimes be negative, can sometimes be positive, depending on where you are, and that is destructive. But this is where forums like this, we can get to engage. We can speak to each other and find out where the misunderstandings are, and then we move. I think the other point I took forward was Miriam's point about dual citizenship and the cost. We'll take that up and put it in our things to do. Francis, who left, talked about someone he knew who was doing agro processing and was having challenges. I wish he had offered the information as to who, but you can ask him eventually to get in touch, and we'll see what we can do. the things we can control, I think, Lynn, we can certainly improve. Finally, if you're speaking to people about investments in and investment incentives in Uganda, I'll put out a proper statement on the types of benefits that are available. But one of my favorite actually is if you're investing in Uganda and you are involved in some kind of training and skilling, the area where human capital development is, because that's how you sustain things over time. The investment authority will excuse 100% of your training costs. Most people do not know that. But secondly, and perhaps finally, if you engage with people who are in the diaspora interested in investments, let them come and look at the requirements. Because if we issue you an investment license, immediately you are entitled to all those incentives. And if you apply for them, you're likely to get them. Because the Investment Code Act does not distinguish, does not discriminate, based on whether you're Ugandan or you're foreign. However, if you are in some areas like oil and gas now, the law actually requires us as an authority to treat you specially as is prescribed in the law. And we'll do our best to ensure that you have the sorts of resources, at least in this institution that we are part of, that allows you to succeed. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much, Angelo, for that. I want to speak to Pollar right now. Pollar, you have talked about the importance of the security of our people, especially our diaspora people, and that the government is always looking out for them. But I want you to speak about investment, in terms of investment, and why you think their security, despite because the government definitely serves everybody. So if it is serving everybody, can they take away the fact that people have different views, do not subscribe to the same parties, and pay attention to the fact that they're Ugandans and deserve to be treated the same? And in so doing, we are enticing them, we're encouraging them to invest back home and develop our country. I don't know, in that line, Pollar, if you can really, at least give us some hope that, whereas the party and the government might not really do the one and the same thing in terms of different things, can you give us some hope that at least we are still Ugandans despite our challenges and our differences, and in so doing, can we develop our country as one?
Yes, I get your concern on that. I think I'd said it, especially if we link security and investment. First of all, we need to know that we are talking of security from two jurisdictions. The security of our diasporians in the host country, and then the security of our diasporians when they come here and their families who are here. Now, in the host country, ordinarily, the physical security is on the obligation of the host states. And that is why just out of, you can see that even if Clinton came here, President Clinton came to Uganda, is given an ADC, which was late Brigadier Taban. So this is an indication that when you are in that country, the security is for that country. However, the security meant by our government offering is in terms of the consular services that I said, that when a citizen is in problem somewhere, there are specific consular activities that should be offered by our government, even if it's outside. And of course, the security, like giving travel documents, passports and ID and all that. Now, home is when you are physically here. It is the obligation of the state to be sure that there's protection of lives and property for whoever is in the jurisdiction of Uganda. Why this matters in investment is because if this person is not safe abroad, then it will not work then he will not get money there. And if there's no security here, then he will not invest when he comes back. Now, as I said, the government in power, that is NRM, has obligations to offer it across the board. It's not only offering to NRM members. So when a citizen, a Ugandan says, my passport is lost in California, government should not first ask, are you NRM for us to give you a passport? No, as long as you are Ugandan. Party, as I said, is anybody's volution. I work as a director at the party, and I would very much encourage people to be in NRM. But the word is encouragement, not compel anybody. So security is offered abroad and home, and without the security, you can't work for money, and without security, you can't invest home. So the government encourages everybody as long as you're Ugandan. The political divide is just manifested in the ballot box. Please go vote the person of your choice. I would, of course, persuade you to vote for NRM, but go to the ballot box and do your vote as you wish. But security and investment is for all Ugandans. Now, I want to comment just a few things that I had. Somebody talked about evacuation in a crisis situation. I think we should differentiate between inability to evacuate and the goodwill. But we should develop the ability to evacuate, because if you don't have the ability, it can be interpreted like the government actually had the bad will not to evacuate. Need to adjust policy. Somebody says a 5-year visa. I don't know whether I was talking in terms of a student from America in Uganda or a Ugandan student abroad. If a Ugandan student abroad, then the issuance of the visa is on the host country. But if it is here, then it is matter that can be looked into. Does the security of diasporans abroad reflect on the investment? That one I've answered. It should reflect, because security both look for the money abroad and security to invest home, and regardless of the party affiliation. Why don't we start with staffing the embassies? A citizen raised this. It would be in the interest of the government to have as many diplomats as possible. I have had the opportunity to have been a diasporian myself. I've lived in Geneva for 8 years as a United Nations expert on human rights. Actually, I've been called it a judge of human rights in Geneva for 8 years. It is always a term of 4 years per Kisanja. So I was voted by General Assembly in New York for 2 Kisanja, for 2 terms. So I know how thin our embassy is. But this is connected to the resources. Some of these things you see, like even if you decide to increase one per embassy, it became such a huge cost, and government would have wanted to provide employment, to provide as many staff as possible. But the challenge has been money. It may not appear easily. There was a time government came up with a very brilliant idea, just to give a half a liter of milk per child per day in school. My God, it looked like very good and very cheap. When it was calculated, it became so big and was abandoned. In Geneva, for example, where I was, you find Uganda is as a thin staff, but you have to attend meetings in World Health. You have to attend a meeting in human rights. You have to go for International Labour Organization. In human rights, I used to ring them when they're absent. I see the Ugandan seat empty. I ring the embassy, said, you guys, are you coming here? The Uganda desk is empty. Then somebody tells you, I'm finishing first a meeting in World Health, then I will run to human rights. Government is aware about this, but it's a question of resources. The issue of dual citizenship. I want to discuss with the concerned parties, the Director of Citizenship, General Goa, and the Commissioner of Immigration, Brigadier Johnson Namanya. Johnson Namanya was my old boy in Intare School. He was my chairman, school council. We were together in school and Makere. I will ask if there are issues that stick out that affect citizens. The issue of citizenship must be discussed, and appropriate policy measures, if need for amendment, can be discussed. That is no problem. we all want everything good for our citizens and Uganda. Most people in the diaspora relate to opposition. We are aware about this, but we can't do much. The best thing that we can do, the president said in one of the SEC meetings recently, is that if you have to mobilize people to join the party, solve their problems. So I am just appointed in this directorate about 4 months ago. If we meet the interest, like consular services, like protection that we talk about, maybe they'll come in. But for me, I don't mind for a free citizen abroad to be in opposition or not, as long as he's exercising his will in consonance with the law. Of course, I will keep persuading you to join my party, but your being there doesn't matter. So if the people abroad are majority opposition, it's fine. We shall keep engagement and we shall ensure that they exercise their will. NRM should not disorganize the North American. As I said, I'm still new in this directorate, but I want to understand the scope of the interference that disorganized the North Americans. But it is in the wish of the party, as I know, that the Ugandans in North America and any other part of the country, I mean of the world, should have an harmonious, self-independent with the wishes of the members, not any interference. And now that I'm an actor, not an observer, I will make sure that that principle is enshrined. Lynn, I think I've covered the security vis-a-vis investment. I beg to end here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Major. That was very insightful, and we're glad you're giving us hope, like I thought you would, really. Thank you very much for the hope that you're renewing in us. And Miriam, I'm certain now you can smile. We seem to have some hope going on here. But before you come in, Miriam, I want to assure Angelo that we're going to get in touch with Francis and make sure that he gets your contact, especially in the things he might need your help on, and also any other person. Obviously, Albert, I'm sure you also might be in need of that. So we shall share the contacts and see how we can all develop our country. Now, Miriam, you've heard from Albert, you've heard from Angelo, you've heard from Paula, and we are talking investment, diaspora community investment in Uganda, opportunities and challenges. Do you think we have reached a point of, okay, we understand we have these challenges and we also have these opportunities. How do we move forward?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Mr. Awich and Izama. I was smiling about the big promises on the big speech from Awich. I know NRM is so good at giving the big speeches, so I had forgotten. Thank you for reminding me. But I'm glad you are thinking positively, though, and let's encourage the discussion and be hopeful. I would like to be optimistic. I'm glad you are also going to follow up on the issue of citizenship. We recently hosted Kano Johnson Namanya and the immigration staff, and we had issues about the passports, and they really followed up and they are doing a good job. We are so happy about it. And yeah, it's citizenship. If it's handled, that's good. But to get back to you on your issue about the staffing the embassies, Mr. Awich, it's not about the numbers here which matter. It's about the competence. I'm sure if you've also been abroad and you've experienced the obstacles and challenges at the embassies, you know so much about it. The competence of the people in the embassies, their attitude, and I think if you work on that, sometimes it's not about the numbers, but it's about the people who matter. How much do they know? How much are they competent in whatever they are doing? And I would like also to mention this to Angela. I don't know if it's possible. You mentioned that most of the remittances from diaspora today are coming from the Arab Emirates, so the Middle East, and then North America. But if maybe there could be a policy whereby where a certain number of Ugandans are living in that country, maybe you also include the investment desk and you put there someone who is competent and committed to talking about opportunities of how Ugandans in diaspora can invest in Uganda. Maybe that one would help. So that if, say, I have a group of people who want to invest, I know I'm going to the embassy and I'm going to find their competent person, same like Angelo, and we discuss and immediately we get a response or the assistance we need from there. And that should be very possible because there are not so many countries which have a considerable number of Ugandans. To talk about on the issue of security, I would like to take Awich's word that, yeah, they are doing something about it and that would be positive. But Mr. Awichi, it would be very, very helpful if you communicate this to the president. Ugandans abroad are not enemies of Uganda. And they could be in opposition, but they are very patriotic. Actually, you don't value the value of you don't understand the value of your country until you go abroad and really know what your country matters to you. So I can assure you, but by default, or if you want to try it out, the most patriotic people are Ugandans living abroad, and they love Uganda. And because they are exposed, some of them, to how countries work, how other states work, how governments work, some of them don't support the issues happening back home because they know better and they think we can do better. So instead of criticizing them, have engagement with them and see how best we can all work together to improve our country back home. And that would work even for your party. You can get more members and more support. But back to the investment, Mr. Angelo, I don't know about the capital market in Uganda, but I think it would be a big vehicle in fostering investment abroad. But it's nowhere. The stock exchange, do they have any programs of marketing their ventures and whatever to the Ugandans in diaspora? Because I don't see much happening. Maybe I'm not looking in the right places. And then the issue of Mr. Awich, this is a correction to what Francis had said about the visas for students. What he was talking about, countries like Uganda or Kenya are the ones to lobby for the conditions of travel and whatever to the countries. For instance, it's Uganda to lobby for, say, the student visa conditions to the US. If you lobby so well, maybe you can reduce it from, say, because a 1-year visa is really the most inconveniencing thing and very discouraging to most Ugandans who would like to say study in USA, because acquiring a visa is very expensive. It's a tedious work, it's so grueling, the things they require. So if you are coming set to do a course of 2 years and every year you need to go back to Uganda to renew your visa, you find it's costly and sometimes you don't even have that time to do so. But the government of Uganda can lobby the government of USA to say, issue 2-year visas to say students of a certain category and all that, student visas or working visas or whatever the visa is in question. So those things are done by the Ugandan government. And back to the Ugandan institutions and especially those who work on diaspora issues. Mr. Awich, I'm sure you know there is some office in charge of diaspora, the president's office or something like that. And then there is another desk in a parliament. We have, for instance, here tried several times to access even one official from those desks, but there is nobody. You can't find anybody. I don't know what they are supposed to do. And I'm sure those people are paid. So that's a waste of resources. Instead of scattering resources here and there and putting their political appointments to be in charge of diaspora who don't do anything. For instance, why don't you give, say, that money to Uganda Investment Authority and they put a competent staff member at the Washington Embassy or United Arab Emirates Embassy who can liaise on matters regarding investment. So it's not about resources. You have the resources, but they are misallocated. And I don't know why. Maybe there is a misunderstanding. Maybe it's just the way NRM government does business. But why would you need a desk here and there, and then all the desks are not doing anything, and the people you put there are not even competent enough. They don't have an idea of what they are supposed to do. If you look into those issues, I'm sure you can find a solution. If you make the diaspora community one of your priorities, like you said, if they contribute 5% GDP, they should be a big constituency. If you make them a priority, I'm sure your resources would be where your interests are. And you'll find a better way to invest in the community more than, which could be beneficial to Uganda back home and then Ugandans in diaspora better than what you are doing right now. So Lynn, let me stop there and listen to other people in the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Miriam. So it is winding up time. And I want to end with Angelo. Angelo, don't go anywhere. You will conclude on this. So Albert, in a few minutes, your conclusion on this conversation and the way forward. Do we have more of these engagements? Do you think Angelo and Paul are going to get us more people that we can engage on various other issues that, of course, have arose out of this particular conversation?
Thank you, Lynn. And of course, we should have more of these conversations, and you keep bringing these knowledgeable people, and we contribute. We don't necessarily have to agree on everything, but I think we share more in common than what we disagree on. And then, like Lynn said, we are patriotic. We love our motherland. We are in these places for different reasons, and then the different journeys that got us here. So this, and I want to echo what Lynn said. No, we're not enemies of President Museveni or his government or Uganda. We're not. We actually love, in my humble opinion, we love Uganda more than some of these bootlickers who keep feeding him wrong information. We do, because that's our future. Though that's most of our people are still there. Yeah, I might be living here with my small family, but my extended family is in Toro. I would like to see Toro do better. I would like to see Uganda do better. So the disagreements we are having, these conversations are healthy, and we should continue them. Again, for Mr. Izama and then the Uganda Investment Authority, the engagements that we are requiring are those, again, like I said, find out what our values are. And I'm glad to hear that he's already exposed to these values. You know our values, okay? We are going to say something. You're not going to shoot 15, 18 people on the streets of Kampala and somehow Albert Bakasara is going to keep quiet. It ain't going to happen. I'm going to talk. And if I get into a conversation, it doesn't matter whether with an American official or whatever it is, that's going to be the conversation. Does that mean I'm ruining the image of Uganda? No, I'm stating facts. Why do you guys keep doing this stupid stuff? Okay, so again, that's not within his control, and these technocrats are handcuffed when it comes to those things. Okay, why can't we all get along? I mean, why do we always have to have these stories that are hampering the image of the country? And again, find out our interests as well. Entice us. What is in it for me? Investment, as Mr. Izama knows, investments are a personal choice. It's a personal relationship between me and my money. Talk to me, see what I'm interested in. Okay, some of us are not interested in these big things of getting rich or kind of, no. Some Ugandans are really what I have realized is most of the people who are living in these parts of the world are really interested in social entrepreneurship. They want to invest in enterprises that actually add to the welfare of the people, to improve the situations of conditions that they grew up in. I have a very good friend in Virginia who started a circle in Kasese. Every time I see him, I ask him, how can we help? Do you need the funds? Do you need any money? Because I'm so anxious. I would love to invest in that than any other scheme that you can come up with and tell me, because I know what he's doing. He's lending money to these market women in Kasese. They borrow a little money and they bring and they go take care of their families. And I'm interested in that. And most of my circles are interested in that. So those are the small little building blocks that I was talking about. For Mr. Awich, please, if the NRM is looking for members, they have a funny way of going about it. But again, you said you're new, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay, making enemies of Ugandans living in the diaspora is not a way to attract people to join your party or support your manifesto. It's not. Okay, harassing me because somehow I've said something that you don't like, or which most of the times is actually the truth, is not going to help. Threatening me that when I land at the airport you're going to jail is not going to help. What will happen is I will not come. And when I don't come, again, this is the relationship that we talked about that now earlier on. When I don't come, my son doesn't come. When my son doesn't come, when I'm dead, I'm in the ground, you don't have a relationship with him. And therefore, even forget the investments, even the little remittances that you've been getting from me is not coming. So unless Uganda somehow has a better way of that is going to replenish those coffers, even the little remittances are going to wither away unless you happen to find a way of nurturing and treasuring and valuing this relationship to make it a mutually beneficial relationship. Thank you, Lynn. And again, let's continue these conversations.
Right. Thank you, Albert. Angela, I see you want to leave, but now you have the floor. You can talk to us, and as we are concluding, really, and we are concluding with you.
Lynn, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and and engage on this platform. It's my first time here. I'm happy to come back at some point to talk about investments. Of course, you know that I actually do core political analysis and risk analysis, so I understand some of the issues that are raised, you know, by our comrades here about the political landscape and the challenges it presents, not just to investors but to citizens. And my background is in civil liberties, so I appreciate some of the finer points on collective rights and how they feed into, you know, the attitude of citizens both at home and abroad. But I see one set of opportunities here, certainly for the authority on whose board I serve, and maybe for Mr. Pollar, who's at the external office of his party, which is, you know, we can provide better information, certainly, about the things that are being done on behalf of diaspora Ugandans. There seems to me like a fog on some of the things that are happening in the country, and even some of the opportunities to solve them quickly. Examples have been given about, you know, the Citizenship and Immigration Office and the work they do there on behalf of diaspora Ugandans, and the kind of outreach that's capable there. On the investment side, you know, I'll share with you eventually, you know, what is required to get an investment license and how do you make the best use of it. There are some, you know, diaspora Ugandans who have been on this side of the equation, and they make regular use of their investment licenses, you know, to find ways to relieve their businesses. But also if they're in areas which are attracting a lot of government subsidy, such as manufacturing, agro-processing, and so on and so forth, we are interested in being of service So let us keep in contact. And I think the one area that the authority can participate much more aggressively in the interest of persuading and encouraging the commitment of diaspora Ugandans, especially to investment, is not to avoid the realities that we are dealing with every day, because we're all Ugandans, we know how things are, but really to provide as much information as possible to enable us to work better collectively. I thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Angelo Izama. Thank you, Pollar Awich. Thank you, Albert Bakasara. Thank you, Miriam, and of course, Francis and the rest that left earlier. We really thank you for this conversation, and I urge you that we have more work to do in regards to diaspora Ugandans and rebuilding our country and being part of our country and our day-to-day activities in the country. So I thank you for your time, and I urge you that next time when we call on you, please don't hesitate. Do join us. Thank you so much. I wish you a lovely weekend, and we'll catch you again next time. God bless you.